Happy Friday. Who's excited about Friday? I know I am. I know Rebecca is. We were just chatting about that. Feel free to say hi in the chat. Tell us what your weekend plans are. What you got going on this weekend? It's going to be a busy one. I'm excited to get my garden started. Can't believe it's almost April. That's just time. Where is 2024 gone? We're already in month 4 here pretty soon. So,
yes.
Wow. So welcome everybody to our last day of this conference, Women in L&D. Rebecca is going to kick us off this morning. Food for thought, navigating motherhood, cooking, and design. Rebecca is the founder and CEO of EB Graphics and Consulting, which is a firm that specializes in instructional design, multimedia production, and accessibility-focused learning experiences. Her expertise enables her to create immersive and inclusive learning experiences for diverse audiences, including working with Fortune 500 companies. She's very passionate about inclusivity and accessibility and is a thought leader committed to driving positive change in the learning and development industry. So excited to hear about what cooking has to do with instructional design and how all of these things and roles that we play as women, parents, overlap into our professional career. Yes. So without further ado, I'm going to excuse myself from the stage and I'm going to turn it over. And Rebecca, happy to have you with us this morning.
Yes, so happy to be here. I always love hanging out with my TLDC group. It's a wonderful community. I'm really, really thankful and appreciative of being a part of it. And I'm also thankful for just, the opportunity to speak to everybody this morning, especially those who decided to join on a Friday. Usually by Friday, everybody's all conferenced out a little bit. So I'm very appreciative of those of you who have made time to just come hear me talk a little bit. And as Abby mentioned, we're going to talk about food for thought, navigating cooking, motherhood, and design. As women in L&D, we have so many personalities, so many roles that intersect, not just, in our actual work lives, but in everything that we do. And ironically, this presentation was born out of a cookbook that I purchased not too long ago. I won't give you the name of the cookbook. I'm not bashing it necessarily, but it's what I call a choose your own adventure cookbook. And that sounds a little strange because when you buy a cookbook, you're thinking, I'm going to get this book of recipes. It's going to tell me everything I need to know. And I'm going to come out with this wonderful dish at the end of it. This book is a little different. So when I first started to go in and do some recipes in it, I began to notice a trend where it would include maybe an ingredient, but then it wouldn't tell you anything about that ingredient, where to use it, how to use it in the actual steps, and vice versa. So it would tell you to do something, but it wouldn't actually give you the steps to do it. It's a lot. And I still have that book. I love that book, and it has a lot of good food that comes out of it. But as I really started to use it more and more and notice that it's almost in every single recipe that is in this book, this $40 cookbook, I began to really think about just what we do on a daily basis. I have actually used a Rachel Ray cookbook to Rita's point. It is different, is what I'll say. The food is different. This one, the food is really great. It's just that the steps aren't all really baked in. You're kind of guessing. And so everybody who probably buys this book has a little bit of a variation. And I really started to think about what we do as women. Every mother's a little different. Every cook's a little different. Every L&D instructional designer is different. We're all so different. And in truth, even when you do all the right things to be successful, like I bought this cookbook and I'm like, we're going to make good food out of it, you will still face the unexpected. So whether you're cooking a meal with this error-prone cookbook or being a parent to children or dogs, your choice, I have dogs as well, or just being an instructional designer, your perfect plan can always and will eventually have some kind of misstep, whether you think about it, don't think about it. And all of those things can be due to a lot of different factors. But the main thing that we struggle with a lot in L&D is navigating the unexpected. And so we want to do things a certain way. We appreciate process. But if you really want to get down and dirty as a consultant or even deeper in your role, you're going to have to learn how to navigate the unexpected. And so what we're really talking about today isn't just food. I'm a Cajun girl, so I love some good food. I come from, The South, we loved cooking. My mother cooks with lard and bacon, like the whole nine. We love good food out here. However, today we're going to talk about how you approach these unexpected moments in your life and in your work. We're going to talk about what are some different strategies to take on these unexpected challenges, and how can you use these unexpected moments that are often stressful and they just put a lot of weight on you to reach the next level in your career journey. At the end of the day, I've been watching a few sessions throughout the week, and there are different polls and different things, and what I've noticed a lot of is that everybody's kind of looking to better themselves, to move forward, to find their next step, to find their lane and find something that they love to do and, grow and develop. And we're going to talk about how navigating unexpected things and knowing how to handle those moments can propel you to be your best self. Because at the end of the day, I'm a firm believer in continuous growth, continuous development, and never really just settling. That's not my personality. So getting into it, defining expectations. What defines your actual expectations? It might sound like a strange question, but it's not. In reality, every expectation that you have is built off of something, right? It can be your belief in a process. Like we all talk about Addie a lot. Some people talk about the Kirkpatrick model. We all have these processes and these thoughts, and you start to think, how do those things that we cling to actually affect and guide the expectations that we have? So if you're discussing something like a recipe, the ingredients that I use, the seasonings I add, the methodology, all of that's going to guide me to conclude and expect that certain outcome that we talked about, right? But when I buy everything on that list, I'm expecting this to come out phenomenal, come out grand. Doesn't always happen that way. But that's where my expectations are. That guided my expectations. I did all these things right, so this should be my result. As parents, we often sometimes think, well, if I do A and B, I will get C. For those of us who are parents of young children, I have a 7-year-old, you probably know that usually when you do A and B, sometimes you can get E, G, X, Z, all these other things that you never would have thought of. My son Ethan is always a surprise. I have taught him manners. I have taught all of these wonderful things to my child. And I sometimes get a report from his teacher that is not what spewed out of his mouth that day. I was telling Abby before the session started, his teacher told him to do something a couple of weeks ago. I think it was getting off an app on his iPad or whatnot. And his response, which is completely not endorsed by me, was, "How about no?" Obviously, afterwards, I talked to my child and told him, don't you do that anymore. That's not how we present ourselves to people. But I've done what I can do in terms of setting a foundation. And sometimes that's just not what happens. Lots of surprises tend to pop up. But when we bring this into the world of L&D, as designers, we always like a good process. We do standard operating procedures. We have all of these things that we do. Some of us have individual processes that we cling to. And we think, if I follow this process, if I use this popular acronym, because we also love our acronyms, don't we? Or I use this method, I will get this result. You think that your learners are going to be mesmerized and transfixed by what you've created, and that they're going to go forth and prosper with your new creation and everything's going to be great. As we all know, however, that usually almost never happens. And a client could suddenly change a deadline. A program may not work. You could encounter learner struggles in your course that you launched because it didn't meet accessibility standards. In some cases, a new project may come onto your plate. Again, something completely unexpected. So that original recipe for success that you had conceptualized and breathed life into is out of the window. And in that moment, you have choices as to what you can do, and probably even some thoughts about what you should do. And I would like to add that these choices that you think you have are usually guided a lot by the things that you absorb. So I don't have a problem with thought leaders. I know my intro called me a thought leader. I don't view myself that way. But if you scroll through LinkedIn right now, you're going to see so many thoughts about so many things in our space. And they all have different opinions of what you should do, where you should go, who you should meet, what you should know. There's tons of books to read, all with different thoughts and ideas. It's a lot to digest, especially if you're newer into the field and you often think about, where should I go? And what path should I take? And this information conflicts with this. So how should I proceed? Like, what should I expect? What should I do? And to be fully honest, you sometimes have to go with your gut. To be fully transparent, those of you who have been with me in a session before, have talked to me for any length of time, have heard about my son, Ethan. He is 7 now, but he was diagnosed with autism around the age of 4. So he is a very special child to us. We love him. He's very unique, very beautiful. Before I even had him, however, Ethan was different. So I was probably about 4 months pregnant, and they told us that Ethan had hydrocephalus. And for those who don't know, that means that he has extra fluid in his brain, can cause a lot of differences, cause a lot of things. There are different levels of it. Some cases are more severe than others. They had actually told us that his was on the extremely severe range and that he would not be able to function. They essentially told us he would not be able to talk. He would not be able to walk. He would have seizures. It was just a lot to process. And in that moment, we had a choice to make. We had a choice to really decide what we were going to do. And that was an unexpected moment. And I remember vividly sitting in his dad's car at the time. It's funny, I laugh at it now, but it was like a 2-seater because he was a complete bachelor. So I'm sitting there pregnant in his car, bawling, crying on the phone with my mother. And she's like, I feel this, I understand this, but Rebecca, you've got a choice to make in terms of how you're going to proceed. Like, are you going to wallow in it? And I know that sounds harsh to some folks, but she's a Southern lady. If you know, you know. She's like, are you going to wallow in this moment, or are you going to step forward and do something else? The choice that I made was obviously to raise this wonderful neurodivergent butterfly that I have in my home. And I tell you this story to say that at some point your expectations have to be defined by you and your gut. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be a good enough mother to this little person. Like, I was scared beyond my wits. But there was that little voice that was just like questioning, because sometimes we experience that imposter syndrome situation. But as an actual full-blown decision, I was like, I'm going to be the best mom that I can be. That's the decision I can make. That's what I can control today. And obviously, we've had an unexpected result. He doesn't have seizures. He's able to talk, has always been able to talk. He can walk just fine. As he runs all over my home, I can hear him actually right now because he's home from school. And sometimes you just have to trust that what's in your gut is going to come to fruition, and it's going to be the way that it should be. For us, I want you to think, sometimes we think ourselves right into a box. When we start to make choices, when we start to make decisions, and we get confronted with some of these unexpected moments, we think ourselves into a box and stifle the possibilities of what we can do and where we can go. And we really do have to begin to break out of the box in both design and in life. I've had people tell me that they can't do what I do in terms of multimedia and graphics. And to some extent, it's true, but it's true in the sense of, no, you won't be able to do exactly what I do because we're different people. But when it comes to design, our expectations should really be defined by our creativity and our power to think beyond what we're fed. So thinking beyond what you may see on LinkedIn and taking that as gospel truth. Again, not shaming anybody who is considered a thought leader. Their truth is their truth. And a lot of it, some of it is based in fact with research and things like that. Some of it is not. Some of it is straight up opinion, and that is fine. People are allowed to have opinions, y'all, and it's okay. But you have to be able to have enough control and enough belief in yourself and in your gut to be able to check whether or not that's your truth, if that makes sense to everyone. And like I said, I love a good process. I love process as somebody who designs videos and animations, but preparing for the unexpected means allowing yourself to think outside that box we just talked about and become more flexible in the belief that we have in ourselves. So many times people will try to cook for somebody for the first time and they're like, I don't think I should be doing this. Like, that's not necessarily me. I don't know if I can do that. Promise that you can. If I can cook with that Error Prone book that I bought for $40, anybody can. I am from the South, but I am not a natural cook. My mom cooks things all the time. That ain't me. So at the end of the day, we really have to understand that breaking out of this box that sometimes we are placed in as women, as mothers, as people, it's vital for us to really reach the place we want to be and grow in the way we want to grow. So let's talk about what you should really do when it comes to navigating these unexpected moments and these unexpected circumstances. Yes, we should think outside the box. Yes, we should allow ourselves to be free and all of these things, but sometimes we don't really feel like that's allowed. A lot of people in L&D work, we work in environments where you don't really feel like you have that autonomy to be your greatest self. But even in those places, you can use strategies to think and incorporate some new out of the box thinking. And I will tell you now, I'm a very, very, very big proponent of proactivity and making mistakes now. I'll ask for permission later because sometimes people just don't know what they need. And that's a real thing. And it's okay. I'm going to think for you a little bit. They usually appreciate it. I don't think I've had a client yet who's like, well, why did you do this? They appreciate the proactivity. Sorry. So first thing I want you to do is focus on thinking ahead. Now, there's a few different ways that you can do this. I advocate a couple of particular ones. I want you to think of first building a support network. Might sound like mental health stuff, but I want you to think of it this way. Whether you work with a client or you're an internal L&D member, you can and should build that network. And I also say that as an introvert. These are the people that you're not only going to brainstorm with, but you can also build good relationships and goodwill. And that can generate some more flexibility for yourself. So even though you may not realize it, when you talk to Mary at the water cooler about that reality TV show that you're actually watching on a weekly basis, I watch several, you're actually creating an ally for your ideas later on. And when the unexpected happens and you're the one tasked with figuring out that problem and moving things forward, you often want an ally because it feels a little bit overwhelming to try to do these things by yourself. So I want you to think of it as kind of playing the long game when we're talking about building like this ally kind of support network within and thinking ahead. But you should also think ahead when it comes to your design. Have contingency plans. People often think, well, my boss didn't tell me to do it, or that's not part of the project. If you are creating something, you have more control than your boss does, quite frankly. Because you are the one who knows what it is, you know how it works, you know how it flows. And so you can easily start to think, well, I know that this particular group over here may have this problem with this learning, the way that I have it now and the way that I've been told to make it. So even though he said he doesn't want it in it, I'm going to plan, even in the back of my head, to have this done. Or at least, think of a way that I can get it done in a quick way. For me personally, I tend to just go ahead and build it in. Does that mean that I have to work a little faster? Yeah, but that's one of those personal growth things. And for me, it's helpful because I have clients who want things quickly. They want it done pretty fast and they want it done now. That's what it is to be a freelancer sometimes. And so for me, I'm always thinking, how can I work faster? How can I work more efficiently? And this is why, because I'm constantly having contingency plans. So next, I want you to think about staying focused. When you're in that unexpected moment, focus on the main objective. Sometimes in life and in work, when we're thrown into a moment that we didn't plan for, we lose sight of the goal and we start focusing on that moment, how it made us feel, how it's not right, all of these different things. We lose complete sight of the goal and we are completely sidetracked. I have a client right now, for example. We have a great rapport. They've talked about putting me on a permanent retainer because they like my work and they really don't want to hire, somebody else off the street. Fantastic, right? Sounds great. One of the team members, though, we have a very complex relationship. We sometimes get along, sometimes we don't. It's just something about our personalities does not always mesh, but it doesn't bother me. And it doesn't bother me because my focus is always on the work. And that particular team member has thrown me a few curveballs off and on. I will say last week, there was a big to-do about like a last minute change in an in-person workshop. I'm creating 11 different workshops for these folks. So it was a pretty handy curveball that she threw me. And she did it in such a way that it almost made me question like motive, which is wild because I've never really had that with a client in the past. And I could have sat in that moment and I could have actually decided to say something to kind of do the get back, to really go in. And I'm just like, it doesn't matter. I already planned for this in some ways because I knew who you were. And I know what can kind of come with some of the madness that we have going on here. But for me, the focus is always the actual work. It's kind of like a Thanksgiving meal, I like to say. My parents, we are again from the South. And so Thanksgiving for us is not just a meal, it's a production, is what I like to call it. I need you to understand there's probably only about 6, maybe 7 people that will show up to this meal, but my parents cook for an army of 20. And it is truly a show. But at the end of the day, even though all of the sides look important, the sides seem more important, people want them more, like the mac and cheese or the dirty rice that takes my father 2 days to make. And that is not an exaggeration. It takes him 2 days to make that stuff because he soaks the meat from the pork bones and makes a broth and makes a roux. And it's like a whole big thing, right? My parents literally do cook for about 2 to 3 days. The main star of the show is always the turkey. The turkey is always going to be in the center of the table. It is always one of those things that will not be neglected. You want it to look good. You want it to taste good. You want it to be the star of the show. Same thing with this. Your main objective should always be the star of the show. Even when things start coming your way that you didn't expect and you couldn't have really conceptualized, the work needs to be the focus. So don't get derailed by kind of some of the things that you feel. Move forward with the next hard thing. And again, that's why you plan ahead for these kinds of things when you can. And finally, put yourself in a position to be realistic, honest, and proactive about what your circumstances are. And again, I think I was talking to Abi about this a little bit earlier. We like to think about what things should be and how they should go, right? You will spend hours looking on LinkedIn, reading about what people should do, and they should do this, and you should do that. And it almost feels sometimes like you almost don't have an avenue to do anything different because it's like, well, this is the popular opinion and this feels like what I should be doing, but I don't know if that really fits for my client or my learners. The reality though, is that at the end of the day, those things aren't there. The things that we say should be there, they're not there. and they don't exist in this moment. And maybe people just aren't interested in that topic. For the longest time, if we look at accessibility, for example, people did not care about that topic. If we're being very real and very honest today, it of course gained a lot more traction in the last few years. I mean, as somebody, as a mother to a neurodivergent child, I am thrilled about it. But the reality is there's still a lot of people out there who are not, they're just not on board. And we can sit and talk for hours about, well, it should be, and they should want to do this, and it's so important. The reality of the situation is our shoulding is not going to make that change. In life, we can't spend forever railing about what isn't there. I've actually had a lot of people in the last few days talk about how they've left LinkedIn for a little bit because they feel like there's a lot of negativity. A lot of that is because you feel like people are complaining. Some of it is not complaining. Some of it is just getting some things out there and they feel like it's important. And I advocate for that and I'm cool with it. I'm just a firm believer though, in I'm not going to sit around and should all day, because if I'm doing that, then I'm not really helping the people that I'm like, they should have these things. Sometimes you have to be the change. It's uncomfortable. Let me tell you, that is an uncomfortable moment when you decide that I really might need to go do this. I was talking to Kim Scott earlier this week. I was moderating her session, and she told me something that she had thought of and nobody had created in 2 years. And I was thinking to myself as she was talking, we should have that. Like, why don't people have that? So I've already started creating something because I'm like, I can't sit and think the shoulds. I've got to go do the do. Like, I've got to go do the things. And we can't necessarily make things perfect, right? Every time that we come out with something, a lot of times the first time it's not perfect. Sometimes that first time you're like, oh, I don't know why I did that. That feels really wrong. And that just doesn't even look good. And for a visual designer, if I'm saying something doesn't look good, we've got a problem. But you have to be willing to sit in that uncomfortable moment of honesty, be it good or bad, and then say, I'm going to go do the thing. So back to Ethan. I talk a lot about him. He's everything to me. So when he was diagnosed with autism, I'm going to be very transparent. As a family, we were at a loss. It wasn't something that I could have planned for. Nobody in our family had ever been diagnosed with autism. And being from the South, it is not something that is necessarily embraced. So if you're from the South and you're a person of color, when we talk about things like mental health, when we talk about things like disabilities, those are not welcome topics at the dinner table. And so we really went through a moment where we didn't know what to do. As a mom, I felt like a failure, like I had done something wrong. Completely not true. But these are the things, like, it was just so heavy in that moment. And I'm like, I had to sit there. And I'm like, it shouldn't be this way. Like, this shouldn't have happened, what have you. Like, no, those kinds of things started coming up. But it's like, I got to sit in this moment and then I have to switch my mindset. I have to go into, I can't change this. And it's okay that he is this. And this is who he is. He is beautiful. He is perfect. He is awesome. So what can we do as a family to support him and bring him to his greatest potential? And that's what we do every day. Like, he has some of the best grades in his class. He is right. I think he's number 2 right now in his class. Never has to study for a spelling test. Like, his teacher told me earlier this week, yeah, he left his homework from last week at the school the entire week. But she's like, he really didn't need it because that Friday he had scored 100 on every single test: English, math, science, history. The boy didn't need to study. Part of that is because we do things with him at home. And we have built a foundation. We have built a village for Ethan to make sure he can reach his greatest potential. And that's because we didn't sit in the should or shouldn't be. We were like, it is what it is. So now we got to go do. And that's a lot of what you've got to do, right? sometimes it's, you got to think about it. We don't have everything that we want to have in learning and development. We just don't. And that's okay, because we still have the potential, wherever we are in our team, wherever we are in our journey, to do the things that can actually get our learners to where they want to go and actually get us to where we want to go. So again, I'm all about being the change. If you're in an environment where you know it's not necessarily accessibility friendly when it comes to learning and development, they might talk about it, they don't really seem proactive about it, and you're like, but it should be this way. Why aren't we adding these things? You know there are neurodivergent learners that are present. They might not be disclosing because they shouldn't have to get support. You can be proactive about your design process. You can be proactive about the way that you think. If you're writing a script, use some simple language. You've done something in the accessibility range, even though it's not the full gauntlet of options that you have. Take some time and create some alt text. Use some time-saving tools like AI. Create some closed captions. Create transcripts. Look at layouts. Look at contrast. Do the things that you can do. Those are proactive measures that you can help someone with before they even mention needing support. And that's really what this is. When we're talking about navigating the unexpected, it really is about being proactive and thinking ahead of what you want your learners to have, even if it's thinking ahead of what am I cooking for dinner. Full disclosure, I have no idea what's happening with that tonight, but that's a whole nother topic for another day. Like, it's all about being proactive and really thinking about what you want to achieve, whether it's at your desk when you're creating, an e-learning, or what you want to achieve in life, whether that's, I want to maybe look into facilitation, or maybe I want to look into LMS administration, or maybe I want to look into multimedia design. Maybe I want to look more into graphics or visual design. Those are options that you have. You can't always wait for somebody to say, hey, you want to go look at, maybe helping us with our LMS. Maybe that's not the thing. Maybe you need to look it up. Maybe you need to kind of become well versed in that. And that puts you in a position where when they need that person, they're like, nobody does this for us. You can absolutely step in and say, I know how to do it. That can get you a new job. That can get you a new position. That can get you a new client. It has happened to me. So even though I know we don't always feel like we can just do all the things as women, we absolutely can. You are allowed to do it. You are allowed to be proactive, and you're allowed to speak your voice. So let's round it out a bit. How can you use all of this unexpected information, all expected knowledge, to prepare for the next step in your journey? Giving you a little bit of an idea of where I come from in terms of my journey. Many years ago, I started off in customer support. Yes, I was one of the people sitting in the cubicle for 8 hours a day, talking to 50, 60 customers a day of varying degrees of happy and angry. It's a thing. It is a job. Those are soldiers, because that is a lot to put up with every single day, 100%. And I was a graphic designer on the side. I've always had side jobs, something I've always done. And I've done that, though, because in that world in particular, things can get very rough. Layoffs happen quite often. And what I didn't want is to sit and just wait, right? I was wanting to embrace the fact that inevitably something unexpected is going to happen. And I wanted to put myself in the position to shift for when that time came, whether it was a layoff or it was I've outgrown this position. I needed to put myself in a position to win. And the reality is that we all love to be in the lane that we're in, right? We all love doing what we do, or we wouldn't do it every day. Sometimes you feel like you're just kind of stuck there. But guess what? You can change your lane. And sometimes you'll stay in the lane that you like and with a company that you love, but that road will at some point more than likely end. And sometimes you can make connections to stay, and you will maybe be the lone one that is able to look and be like, all these other people have been laid off except for me. You can see the essentially the winds of change. But that means that you need to embrace the fact that unexpected things happen and you need to be in a position to win. So that could be upskilling. That could be, approaching things really just from a continuous learning standpoint. So if you ask me today what I can do in terms of instructional design, I can give you a laundry list of things. And that is not a lie. I can do everything from animations, video production. I do voiceover. I do sound mixing. I do all the articulate things. I do graphics. I do illustrations. I do all of those things because that's where I come from. I come from a world of graphic design in the background. Conversely, however, if you ask me what I want to explore in terms of my current and next phase of my career, I can tell you that as well. And a lot of it has to do with software development. Completely weak in that area. Like, I have created an app in the past, but I am not a true developer. I want to be. And I want to be so that we can start creating the things that I know learners should have, essentially. I want to go do the work. And that's really what it's about for me. And it's also realizing that you have the power to make the choices that you want. At the end of it all, we always feel like, I don't know if I can really make that decision. I don't know if that's right for me. I don't know how people will receive. I don't know. Absolutely, Cindy. I don't know how people will receive this decision I'm going to make. I don't feel like I can do that stuff. It may take time, but you can. I did not start off making animations and making videos, and I've been drawing since I was probably about 5. Like, from the time I could hold a pencil in my hand, I was drawing, and it's what helped me to express myself. But you have the power to make the choices you want to make. Sometimes it's just realizing you have the ability to do greater things than maybe what people have set you up for. I have routinely had bosses, and this is no lie. I've had bosses tell me things like, you will never be anything more than a customer service agent. I have had them tell me, you're a terrible designer. I've had them tell me, you will never get a client on your own. All of those things I have disproven. They have been disproved because I have my own clients. I am a designer that people want, and I'm absolutely not a customer service agent anymore. By choice, obviously. But it all comes back to, you can make these choices, folks. Nobody has to necessarily prop you up for your choices. You have to realize that you have the power to do them. Like, we made choices when it came to Ethan. We made choices to his future and what we wanted him to be and how we wanted him to feel loved and appreciated. I've made a choice not to return my error-prone cookbook or bash it on social media. Like, spending $40 on a cookbook is not cheap. And then I'm buying things on this ingredient list that are missing when I go to the steps. So I never get to use it. I'm not kidding. I've got about 5 or 6 different seasonings in my cabinet that will probably never be used because I don't know how to use them. And you can make the choice to realize that you have power in whatever position that you're in. If you're an internal team member, you can influence others and show them what your learners need. And if they don't want to hear it, that's fine too, because you also have the power to shift gears if people aren't listening. You don't have to always run at everybody else's speed. You might run faster than them. They just may need to catch up to you, and that's okay. They'll catch up eventually, but that just means that you keep pushing forward. And as people, as women, we don't always feel like we're in that power position, but the reality is that we are. We are typically gifted at emotional intelligence. We're typically gifted at organizational skills. We're also really good strategists. And that puts you in a unique position that you can take these moments of unexpectedness and turn them into a moment to break the barriers that we actually encounter. I know that most of us on this call have absolutely experienced barriers. We've experienced moments where people don't see us. People, they just kind of maybe look through you, or they're like, well, oh, you just started in the L&D, so you don't know what you're talking about, and you don't feel seen, and you don't feel heard, you don't feel validated. At the end of the day, shift that focus. If they don't see you, at least develop the moment that you see yourself, because I'll tell you, that moment is important, and that moment is pivotal. That, I will tell you, is a huge, huge reason that I am where I am today. People weren't seeing me. They weren't seeing me. Some people still don't see me, and that's fine too. They don't have to. I see me. And if nothing else, I want Ethan to see me. I want Ethan to see a woman who is able to go down, get dirty, and do the work. And at the end of the day, it's about what you see. It's not what everybody else sees. So one of my shorter talks, I will say, but I wanted to leave off thanking everybody. This is actually an illustration that I did, if you're wondering. But I wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to hang out with me today and learn something. Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else, but I'm ready. Rebecca, when are you going to create your TED Talk? Because I feel like that's what you should. I feel very inspired after hearing your talk this morning. I think it's just how I wanted to kick off my morning.
That is actually a goal for 2025. So I am working on a TED Talk.
I think that would be fantastic. I know a lady who actually just did one on imposter syndrome. So if you want the intro, maybe you talk to her about how she did it. Definitely happy to make that connection for you.
Yes, happy to take it.
Let me know. But yeah, that was definitely an amazing talk, and I think very inspirational and much needed.
Yes. I'm like, any questions?
The questions, let me check back here. It looks like a question just, Toddy asked, what do we do with the leftovers?
Well, I feed them to my puppies. No, I'm kidding. I'm like, we cook with all kinds of bacon grease. That would make the dogs sick, right? Honestly, there's usually not a lot of leftovers at any function, at any time in my home. It's wild, actually. And I will say that Ethan has probably one of the more fun palates of his classmates because I cook with truffle oil. No, I'm not that fancy, but he is.
Awesome. Did anybody else have a question? I know that you are getting ready to hang out at a table after this. So happy to wrap. If anybody wants to hop and continue the conversation with Rebecca, you can definitely find her at a table here shortly once we close out the session, which I think I'll do if there's nobody else that wants to ask any questions. Feel free to hop to a table. And then our next session, I think Cindy's closing us out today for the last two sessions of the day. The next one will be at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time about transitioning from learning leader to entrepreneur. So definitely catch that session. But in the meantime, if you just want to hang out, catch us at the tables. Oh. Let's see here. I think Cindy had a question. Are you speaking anywhere else this year?
Yes. So right now, I have a couple of proposals in. We'll see how that goes. But right now, I'm actually slated to speak at the e-learning conference in Toronto in June. And then I'm also slated to speak at the Kirkpatrick Summit also in June in Virginia. So that's what's on the table right now. There's a couple other proposals, hoping to maybe see some folks and some other things. But if anybody wants to kind of keep up, please feel free, connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn's here. Or if you'd like to email me, that's fine too. I always kind of announce and let people know what's going on.
Awesome. Definitely contact information is here. Definitely take a screenshot, reach out. If you have time, hang out at a table here. If this is the only time that you had during your lunchtime, totally fine. You can catch the replays of the rest of the sessions and this one. You can watch it again. I know I will. Definitely need to hear these words again. So I hope everybody has a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch you in a future session.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.